How do you know when you should leave your job and go all in on a startup idea, or if you should just stay and work on something part-time? Maybe because you don't have the finances to support it, or you're not for sure that it's going to work, and finding another job if it doesn't is going to be pretty painful. This is the question I'm going to talk about in this video. I'm going to tell you my personal experience, and short answer is it really depends on you, your risk tolerance, what your goals are, and what your financial situation is. But the long answer has a lot more things and nuances that you should be considering if you are planning on making this type of step. Now, disclaimer about my story. My path was a bit different. When I finished college, I immediately went to the Bay Area and started working a software job. And around 6 months later, I decided I wanted to quit. So I moved back from California all the way to Toronto. And I ended up having to live with my mom again for another 2 years before I finally was able to move out. And I didn't move out because my business succeeded. I moved out because in those 2 years, I tried like 10 different business ideas and lost my entire savings, plus went $30,000 into debt trying different business ideas to make money. At that point, I realized once all my credit cards were maxed out that I had no other option but to get a consulting job. So I used a platform called TopTal.com, which is like a software consulting agency that gets you contracts and stuff like that. And I pretty much worked there for another year while doing stuff on the side and then paying off all my debt, plus moving in with my girlfriend and stuff like that. After that job finished, I had a bit of money saved up, so I did the same thing again. I went and I tried starting another business, and I did that for a little bit, ended up losing money, and then when I was out of money, I ended up getting another job. And that was sort of my cycle. I pretty much kept on working, saving up enough just to survive for maybe a year without a job. And then I would just try different business ideas. And I must have like 40 failed businesses under my belt. And a lot of these weren't legit. Some of these are like businesses that maybe for 2 weeks I would try like an affiliate marketing business. At one point I started an e-commerce business that was essentially drop shipping, and I made $70,000 in sales. But the kicker was I spent $90,000 in ads. So I actually lost 20K in those 4 months. Even though I learned a ton, it wasn't financially viable. And getting to a financially viable startup is not something that happens overnight, which is why a lot of people that do choose to leave their jobs end up going the route of getting funding. They'll get into YC, maybe an accelerator, or they'll have a lot of money saved up. So you really need to ask yourself, what type of position are you in, and what are the stakes if you were to leave? If leaving your job now gives you maybe a 6-month runway to make something work, and it is hard to get another job if things fail, then you might want to make sure you have a more solid foundation or look for funding before you go all in. I'll tell you right now, in 6 months, your chances of making enough money from a business to support what you would have been making as a developer is very, very, very unlikely. It is hard to make $100,000 a year as a business compared to the plethora of opportunities out there for developers. I was also on that contracting website, and if I wanted to, I could get another contract job that was paying $50 to $150 an hour just like that. And it made it so that I had a lot of freedom to really get things down to the wire where I almost had no money at all, and then I could just get a job within the next week. But a lot of people might not have that opportunity. So if it's going to take another 3 months of you interviewing with companies before you get another job, that might be another reason that you should maybe wait a bit longer before actually trying to maybe go all in on your business. Now, the best case scenario you could be in is if you have a job, you're an experienced builder, you know exactly what you want to build, you can build maybe a prototype of it, get some maybe small action, some small MRR while you are still working at your company. Take that to an accelerator like Y Combinator or maybe some seed investors and actually pitch it to them and try to get initial funding. Once you get that first like 100, 200, 300, 400K in initial funding, you're probably in a position where you have enough runway for you, maybe your co-founder, if you have one, to go all in on the business for 1 to 2 years and be ramen profitable. Ramen profitable is when the business brings in enough money to support you and your co-founders by living off of just ramen, aka the bare necessities. You should have a very good idea of what that is. Additionally, you should probably make sure you have at least 6 months of savings saved up. And this is just general advice I've seen around, that you should have 6 months of savings saved up in case something goes wrong, like you lose your job. But you definitely at least want that runway on top of whatever your startup's runway is, so that you can go and transition and find a job if you need to. Now, not everyone lives by these rules. I'm sure there are some people that are exceptions. They might drop out of their job and immediately have a successful business within the next 4 months. And while those people exist, They are the outlier. A lot of the times you're going to be putting money into the business before ever seeing a dollar out of it. So if you think that you'll be able to just quit your job and get something up and running where it supports you within the next 6 months, that usually doesn't happen from what I've seen, especially if you are a first-time founder. Now, there are some other things you have to weigh as well, like responsibility. I know a lot of people that once they had children and they got married, the amount of time they had to work on something outside of their job greatly diminished. So you probably, if you are going to take a leap of faith, want to do it while you are still young, and the only responsibilities you might have is looking after yourself in terms of food and rent. Because by the time you're in a position where you're looking after a whole nother human being, chances are you probably won't have the ability to leave and just risk everything to try and make a startup work without funding. So it really comes down to you, and number one, how financially stable are you currently? Number two, how much risk are you okay to have? Number three, if things were to fail, how fast would you be able to get back on your feet and find another job? And number four, how much experience do you have as a builder? Because if your answers to all four of those questions aren't that great, chances are you probably have enough time after your day job to work on stuff, get some extra skills, extra expertise, prove that your idea works by validating it and getting a few initial customers before you have to go and take a big leap of faith. And I'm going to leave you with something that I didn't learn until very recently. And if I knew, it would have changed a lot, which is a lot of the times, if you're not used to working on stuff outside of a job, let's say you're not used to being self-disciplined or self-motivated, the amount of time you are going to put into a startup once you quit your job, you're not magically going to get all that time that your job would have had for your startup. A lot of the times, the effective hours you have in the day towards something is less than 8 hours a day. So by leaving your job, yes, you have more free time during the day, but it doesn't necessarily all that 8 hours is going to be productive hours that you would have worked on a business. Chances are, if you were to go all in on it, unless you're very self-disciplined, you might not make the most of all of that time anyways. So there's a lot of things you should be worried about cultivating before going all in. That being said, don't let that stop you from doing something you want to do. I knew from a very young age that the only thing I wanted to do was entrepreneurship, and regardless of whether my business exits or how rich I get, I'm going to continue doing this for a very, very, very long time. So to me, I didn't really mind constantly being out of money, leaving my job and just failing over and over again, because I'm thinking on a decade by decade timeline. I'm thinking 4 decades in the future, the skills I'm learning now, how they're going to help me there. And if you are someone that plans to be in entrepreneurship for a long time and you're not just trying to start one successful company, make a bunch of money and exit, I would recommend thinking in that timeline as well, and it'll put a lot of things into perspective. But anyways, if you have any comments, it helps a ton with the YouTube algorithm, and I'll see you guys in the next video.